I do love watching everyone's smiling faces come on. As many of you know, we had our first ever all-school assembly today, so we watched 900 smiling faces come on across multiple screens. It was super amazing. Hold on, I think I have a text from a presenter. Give me one moment. Hi, everyone. We're just gonna give it a couple more minutes, just so everyone has a chance to sign on, and then we'll get started. If the panelists can hear me, I'm gonna move the order around just slightly so we can end with a song. So it shouldn't impact anyone significantly, but I thank Rabbi Angela for making that possible. Although I'm a little worried Rabbi Angela can't hear us. Can you hear us? Give me a thumbs up there. Oh, good. She's good. Okay, fantastic. Okay, we'll give people one more minute and then we'll get started. All right, are the panelists ready if we get started in a minute? Everyone good? Awesome. So welcome everybody. We had a wonderful, wonderful last day of school before break today. It was really filled with, for me, all kinds of joy and inspiration and time together as a huge community and as divisional communities in a way that felt just right to start this holiday communally. I'm incredibly grateful that at the end of our long and full last day of school, we have these incredible panelists with us. As we were thinking about our different communal Pesach programs a few weeks ago, we really wanted to think of ways that our faculty and community could offer something unusual and unique to everybody in this unusual and unique year of Pesach, when many of us are doing very different Seders than we have ever done before. So this panel was planned as part of that. And we owe the theme, which feels just right to me now, as we finish this part of the school year and enter the holiday. The theme is one of hope, and we owe that theme to Rabbi Dahlia, who had the creativity and insight to think that this would be a wonderful organizing idea for all of the texts we're going to share tonight. So with my enormous gratitude to all the panelists, I'm going to turn it over to Rabbi Dahlia, who's going to frame the program for us. And then we will offer, I guess, 8 texts, one after the other, some musical, some poems, texts of all different kinds. They will all be available tomorrow on the Hub so that you can use them at your Seders if you choose to do so. And if we have time at the end, we will happily take comments, questions, anything like that. So with that and my great thanks, I turn it over to Rabbi Dahlia to kick off the evening. And again, thank you all for being here tonight. It's truly a joy. Rabbi Dahlia.
Thank you, Ariella. I'm going to share my text with you visually. I'm going to assume you're seeing it. Otherwise, Ariella will let me know. I wanted to frame tonight with our title. So our title tonight is for a night of text surrounding hope, L'Shana Haba'ah. We end the Seder each year announcing L'Shana Haba'ah, next year in Jerusalem. And when you're in Jerusalem, you announce another hope, L'Shana Haba'ah B'Yushalayim Hab'ruya, in the rebuilt Jerusalem, always with an eye. Once we complete the Seder, we're always having our eye to next year's Seder. And I wanted to take a moment to think about L'Shana Haba'ah, what it means to express our hope via Jerusalem. So in the Talmud, in Masechet Ta'anit, Rabbi Yochanan says that the Holy One, blessed be God, that God said, I will not come to the heavenly Jerusalem, or in Hebrew, Yerushalayim Shel Mala. I will not come to the Jerusalem of above, if you will, until I come to the Jerusalem of below, until I come to earthly Jerusalem. And the Gemara asks, is there a heavenly Jerusalem? And the answer is yes. How do we know? It's written in the book of Psalms that Jerusalem is built as a city that has been connected together. Yerushalayim habnuya k'ir shechubra la yachdav. So if Jerusalem is built as the city that's two parts of it are brought together, there must be two Jerusalems, Jerusalem of above and Jerusalem of below, a heavenly Jerusalem and an earthly Jerusalem. And what I love about this text is that Rabbi Yochanan has God saying here, quotes God as saying that God's self cannot enter into the heavenly Jerusalem until God is immersed in what's happening on earth. So God's hopes and dreams for what Jerusalem could be and what Jerusalem will be and what heavenly Jerusalem is can only be true when God experiences what we human beings are experiencing here in Jerusalem, that is here on our reality. And I say this because I think it's really important to remember always and this year that hope does not need to be divorced of reality. We don't need to express hope that feels so far away that it feels out of our reach. Hope is intertwined with one that is grounded in what's happening here for us now. And if ever there's a moment to experience that, was today for me when Ariella was speaking to the student body and her emotions caught her off guard a little bit. And to me, that was a moment of heavenly Jerusalem mixed in with earthly Jerusalem. We are doing so much to care for one another and to ensure that we get to heaven Jerusalem, to the Jerusalem of above, L'Shana Haba'ah, to next year's Pesach and what next year's Pesach will bring. And we need to do so at every moment, fully aware of the complications and the hardships that are going into this year's Pesach, the current Jerusalem that we are living in. And let the two be mixed in together as we prepare to sing at the end of our Seder's L'Shana Haba'ah, and as we prepare, hopefully, to experience hope throughout, while also allowing our feelings of nervousness and of trepidation and of worry for all the people amongst us to be a part of our Seder too, because that's what's going to get us to Yerushalayim Shel Mala. And I look forward to being there all together this year at the Seder, and God willing next year, even more, even higher above, if you will, all together. Thank you for being here tonight. I'm thrilled to hear all these texts on hope, to inspire all of us, and hopefully to bring to share with our families and with our loved ones via Zoom or in present company this week at our Seder. Chag Sameach.
Thank you, Rabbi Dahlia. What a beautiful way to start. Deborah Ann Standig, please take it away.
Thank you, Rabbi Dahlia, and thank you, Ariella. Thinking about the heavenly and the earthly Jerusalem feels like an appropriate introduction to a text from a man, from a medieval liturgical poet who was a yearner. And there is this beautiful piece of liturgical poetry written by Shlomo ibn Gabirol. If you can see in the Hebrew, the first word of each piece of this passage, the first letter in each word spells out the name Shlomo, which is his first name and is a pretty typical device of authors bringing their names into their writing. And I was thinking about this piece, which I'll read in a moment, where the speaker is yearning for relationship, even in moments of dawn and in darkness. And yet the speaker says, I will still scream out and pray with all of my joy to you in these moments where it's still dark. Shachar avakeshcha, at dawn I seek you, tsuri umiskabi, my rock and my refuge. Et roch lefanecha, shachari vegam arbi. I'll prepare before you my tefillah, my prayer in the morning, really when it's still dark and the sun has not yet risen, and when it's night, when the evening has come. Lifnei gedulatcha e'emod ve'ebahel ki eincha tir'eh kol machshavot libi. But I stand in awe of you because you know everything that I'm experiencing and that I'm feeling. And yet, maze asher yuchal halev v'halashon la'asot, but I'm limited because what can my heart and my mouth, how can I express everything that is inside of me? Hine lecha titav zimrat enosh. But I believe that the sounds of our song is beautiful to you. Al kain odcha be'od tihye nishmat Elohahbi. And therefore, I will thank you, I will acknowledge you, I will sing to you so long as I am living. And this is a man who didn't have the relationship with a Jerusalem. It was a broken Spain. It was an enlightened galut life that Ibn Gabirol led. And I know myself, the prayer that I feel right now, the intention I need to set in order to be able to sing. There is this unbelievably powerful idea that we're going to get together and we're going to acknowledge on Wednesday night that we're in a moment, and yet our people have been through many, many difficult moments, that the Yetziat Mitzrayim is not only a mythical or myth story or historical story of our people, but it's a metaphor for leaving a narrow place. And like Rabbi Dalia spoke about, sometimes we have to imagine having left the narrow place even before we can leave it. That the first step of the possibility is in finding the joy even in the moments of the darkness and the pain. So this piece of poetry that was initially intended as an intro to Shacharit Tefillah, as a warm-up, as an intention setting, for me feels like the kavanah, the intention I want to bring to my own Seder, that the songs that we bring are the expressions of our deepest desires, and that God should find them, or the power beyond us should find them as pleasant, and see that we are continuing to be grateful, even in moments of deep pain.
Thank you. Yishar kochech. So beautiful. Austin Davis.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to share with you tonight a poem that's really become a favorite of mine. And as I'm opening up to share it with you, I have to credit my colleague Alana Anderson, who introduced me to this poem called Kindness by Naomi Shihab Nye, which has become a favorite of mine and has become a poem that I've actually used in my own family Seders for several years now. So I'll read it to you and then I'll tell you a little bit about why I chose it for this event. Kindness. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment, like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go, so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, You must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to gaze at bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, "It is I you have been looking for," and then goes with you everywhere, like a shadow or a friend. So that poem actually, the poet Naomi Shihab Nye tells a really beautiful story that's easily available online about when what inspired this poem. And to tell you briefly, she's an American poet, contemporary American poet, and she was on her honeymoon in the first week of her honeymoon in Colombia in South America. And she was on a bus with her husband, and the bus was hijacked, and the bus was stolen, and all the people were told to get off. And there was actually a man who was killed in the process of trying to resist. And so they're left stranded in this small town in Colombia, and all of their possessions are gone. They have no passports, they have no money, they have no clothes. And she and her husband are there, and they're very, very emotional. And this man comes up to them and just says to them, what happened? He hadn't seen what happened. And they told him, and he just said, "I am so, so sorry for what's happened to you." And that moment was so powerful for her, that the first moment that she could sit down after they were figuring out what to do in this pretty tough situation, she writes this. She sort of says she feels inspired and writes this poem. And so that's the poem, and the story behind it are inspiring to me for all Passover Seders, because I think that the story of Passover is one that's about small and large acts of kindness in the midst of so much sorrow and oppression. And I love the idea that it takes intense sorrow in order to see the value of kindness. That kindness can only really bring itself into your eyes when you have seen the size of the cloth, when you have seen the full spectrum of experience. So that's something that's been meaningful to me for every year, and in particular this year. I hope you have a chance to look back tomorrow at some of the specific references here. About seeing the person on the side of the road and thinking that it could be you. Language about the breath in this poem has struck me anew this year, and thinking about what's happening in the world right now. And I've also been struck also in the face of what feels like such sorrow every time I open the news, and every time I wake up and realize it's going to be another day of not going to work and not seeing my students. I've been struck by these acts of kindness that have come to sort of dominate my way of being. So the sort of power of the 7 p.m. chants outside the window, I don't know how many of you are experiencing that at your homes, the sort of moment of sort of exuberant gratitude of people sort of thanking medical professionals who are changing their shifts has become a highlight of the day. Or the sort of acts of kindness of seeing schools and organizations donating supplies, people figuring out where to be sending resources right now has become a major thing that I've been thinking about. And even the last thing is also the small acts of kindness around my home, as I've had to sort of figure out what it is to live at home, and the small acts of kindness with my husband in our first year of marriage, just like Naomi Shihab Nye was when she wrote this poem. Those small acts of kindness are, to me, powerful parts of the day. So please take a look at the poem again tomorrow, just because you got to briefly see it right now, but it's a beautiful one, and it's my offering to all of you on this Pesach.
Thank you. Beautiful. We are going to have two musical texts tonight, and I'm going to ask Adina Korn to present the first one now. Thank you. Thank you, Austin. Adina.
Hi, everybody. So I have the privilege of trying to keep music going with our students over this interesting time. And it was not on purpose, but the harmonizers in the high school were learning a James Taylor song called That Lonesome Road. And within our first 2 weeks of being out of school, we managed to put together a little recording of it, and I would like to play it for you. Before I do, I just wanted to connect it a little bit to the theme that we've been talking about. I'm not revealing anything when I say we know that music is the language of emotion, because it encapsulates what verbal language can't. And in the way that it builds and releases melodic tension, it reflects the ups and downs of real life. And in that reflection, it allows us to really validate everything that we're feeling internally, and therefore helps us acknowledge our humanity. And when we do that, we allow ourselves to feel, we also create some more space in ourselves. And hopefully that space can be filled with our internal strength. This song might not, on the face of it, feel like a symbol of hope. But it does capture some of the feelings of this very unique moment in time. There's a sense of melancholy, a bit of loneliness, and some wanted or unwanted time for self-reflection. But it is hopeful in that it reminds us to carry on because we have a destination to reach, and tomorrow will be a better day. So I hope you can hear it well, and thank you to all my students who on a really complicated week sent in their voices for this. Okay, can you see it? Okay. Walk down that lonesome road all by yourself. Don't turn your head back over your shoulder, and only stop to rest yourself when the silver moon is shining high above the trees. If I had loved you, listen once or twice. If I had closed my mouth and opened my eyes. If I had cooled my hair and warmed my heart, I'd not be on this road tonight. Carry on, carry on, carry on. Never mind feeling sorry for yourself. It doesn't save you from your troubled mind. Walk down that lonesome road all by yourself. Don't turn your head back over your shoulder, and only stop to rest yourself when the silver moon is shining high above the trees. Thank you. I could see this.
Thank you, Adina. If anything gives me hope, it's the fact that our beautiful high school students at home by themselves recorded those tracks, set them into Adina, so that Adina could help them come together and make beautiful music like that. I can't think of anything more hopeful at this time of social distancing than that. So thank you, Adina, for sharing that with us. Rabbi Noam Silverman, take it away.
Thank you. Excuse my tears. I'm going to try to dry them, and maybe speak to the voice of children in terms of finding hope. The question of the text that I want to share with you, I think, really raises the question: where does hope emerge from in face of such despair or challenge? Hope feels so irrational. And how can it emerge when it doesn't feel hopeful? And I'm speaking about the Exodus story, but the biblical text, I think there's a couple of opportunities from where hope emerges. This year, a particular point in the biblical text of Exodus really spoke to me as a moment of deep hope and possibility. Chapter 1 of Exodus, just briefly, is really the opening of the difficulties and the enslavement of the Israelites. And it ends, the end of chapter 1 ends with Pharaoh decreeing not only are all male Hebrews children going to be killed, but all male babies are going to be killed. There's a sense of deep fear and ruthlessness emerging from Pharaoh, and a deep sense of hopelessness, I think, that emerges for the reader in reading chapter 1 of Exodus. Chapter 2 introduces Moses, his birth, and the beginnings of redemption. But the opening verse of chapter 2 of Exodus is quite surprising and vague. It reads in the Hebrew, it's the very first piece of text on the sheet, and I hope that you could see it. Vayelech ish mi beit Levi vayikach et bat Levi. A certain man not named of the house of Levi went and married a certain woman, a Levite woman. No name, no information. And then verse 2 is this woman becoming pregnant and giving birth to Moses. So the rabbis of the Midrash, of course, try to fill in this very empty verse 1. And the Midrash, and this is a Midrash that appears a couple of places in rabbinic literature. The source in front of you is from the Babylonian Talmud, tractate Sota. There's a number of different Midrashim about the early chapters of Exodus. And the Midrash asks, Lehechan halach, vayelech ish mi beit Levi, a certain man from the house of Levi went. And the Midrash asks, where did he go to? And the Midrash answers, Shahalach ba'atzat bito. He went and he married this woman because, according to the advice of his daughter. And then the Midrash continues, and I'm going to, just for the sake of time, I'm going to leave you with it, and you'll have a chance to hopefully look at it more in depth tomorrow. The Midrash continues to imagine this episode happening, that Amram, Moses' father, had two children, Miriam and Aaron. And as Pharaoh decrees that all of the male Hebrews should be killed, Amram, who the text says was the great man of his generation, feels a sense of hopelessness and decides, this doesn't make any sense. I'm going to divorce my wife, Yocheved. I can't stay married with her. And all subsequent Hebrew men do the same. They all divorced their wives. There was no sense of hope. There was no sense of continuity. They were fully broken. And it's Amram's daughter, Miriam, who confronts her father and says, you can't do that. You can't be hopeful. You can't be hopeless. Your decree, what you're doing, is actually worse than Pharaoh. And goes on to give this very aggressive response to her father, saying, you got to basically man up, and you have to remarry and reconnect with our mom, and you have to bring life into the world. And he agrees and reconnects with his wife. And from this reconnection, as Abel, Yocheved gets pregnant, and Moses is brought into the world. And with Moses's birth, of course, the beginning of the redemption of the Hebrews, of the Israelites, is made possible. So this Midrash imagines that the moment of hope is specifically the chutzpah, the audacity, the irrationality of young children to confront their parents and say, don't be hopeless. There's reason to be hopeful, even if it's not rational, even if it doesn't make sense. There's a reason to continue to believe. And this comes, I think, into play in the Passover Haggadah, and a verse that we use pretty early on with the 4 children, but actually it comes from the end of this part of the Exodus story, chapter 13, right before they actually leave Mitzrayim, leave Egypt. And Moses is speaking to the Israelites, and he's imagining a moment, and I find these few words so hopeful. Moses, I think, here is channeling his older sister Miriam, his inner Miriam, and he says to the Israelites, we're going to do this ritual of Passover for years to come, and there's going to be a whole bunch of rituals connected to remembering the Exodus and Passover, and we're going to do them, and when you do them in generations to come, your children won't know anymore why you're doing them. But there was going to be a time, Moses says, V'haya, and this is Exodus 13, V'haya ki yishalcha bincha machar lemor. Moses is speaking to a people who are broken, a people who don't see a tomorrow, a people who don't know what freedom can possibly mean. And he says to them these powerful words, V'haya, and it will come to pass. This moment too shall pass. And not only will this moment pass, but the moment that will pass will introduce something that you can't even imagine now. You will have children, bincha, you will have a future. And not only will you have children, but your children will once again pick up creativity, imagination, possibility, and they will wonder. And how do I see that in the text? Ki yishalcha, they will ask questions. And of course, you can't ask a question without creativity, imagination, possibility. Right? I think it is why the Seder is centered around questions. It is the example par excellence of what it means to really imagine different possibilities, what it means to actually not be constrained by the here and the now, but to imagine what a world without slavery, a world without pain, a world without poverty can actually mean. And so Moses tells the Israelites on the cusp of their freedom, have hope. This will come to pass. You will once again live in a world where you will have children, where there will be a future, and not only a future, but a future that will be filled with possibility, a future that will be filled with imagination, with creativity, which I think is actually also what hope is about. So that possibility for hope, I think, for me, is speaking so powerfully this year from the audacity of our children, from the audacity of our kids, of the Miriams among us, whether they're children or adults, who hold on to that sense of optimism, who can read the news and still believe that this will pass, and then we will get through this, and we will get through this together, and we will get through this well, if we just continue in the ways that many of my co-presenters have shared, with a sense of spirit and kindness and possibility. So thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for including me.
Thank you. So beautiful. I love these texts together. Eti Yammerhen, you're up. You have to unmute. Hold on, I'll unmute you.
Sorry, I forgot.
You're good.
Hi. So to me, so much of the Pesach Seder is, inspires a sense of hope. Maror with charoset, the bitter herbs with the sweet, symbols of springtime on the Seder plate, Dayenu imparts a feeling of gratitude and appreciation of what we have instead of what's missing. In particular, though, the idea of liberation is what gives me hope. The main part of the Seder starts with Yachatz. There's no text with this, it's a silent action. We start by breaking the middle matzah, which represents the brokenness, as it were, in the world. Next comes Magid, the talking, the sharing, the learning as we tell the story about the despair, the bitterness, the lack of freedom of what we had in Mitzrayim, in Egypt. We think about the imperfections in the world, but we progress from Yachatz to Tzafun when we eat the afikoman, that broken piece of matzah. As a people, there have been so many times when we were enslaved, trapped in situations where there seemed to be no hope. We didn't expect anything to happen. Progressing from Yachatz to eating the afikoman seems to me to be a sign that despite all the bitterness, the fear, the unknown, that there is hope for the future. Our liberation comes from first recognizing that there are things broken in the world and in our lives. And only when we recognize the imperfections can we then move forward. Some of you may have heard of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. He was the founder of the Breslov Hasidic movement and was the great-grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, who was the founder of Hasidic Judaism. Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov taught love, joy, and humility, both in service of God and in our treatment of fellow human beings. Rabbi Nachman revived the Hasidic movement around the late 18th, early 19th century by combining Kabbalah and in-depth Torah scholarship. One of his famous quotes is, "En shum yeush be'olam klal," which means there's no despair in the world. How can he say that? Of course there's despair in the world. The Jewish people certainly felt despair in Mitzrayim, in Egypt. So many of us are feeling this way right now with the current situation. And might want to give up hope, but he says, do not give up hope. I'm going to share my screen. Give me a second. He says, "Ha'ikar lechazek atzmo bechol ma she'afshar ki ein shum yeush ba'olam klal." The main thing is to encourage oneself in every way possible, for there's no such thing as despair. Rav Tzadok Cohen of Lublin explains this statement. He was considered an Eloi, one of the most brilliant Talmudists of the 19th century. He says, "Tachlit zchirat yitziat Mitzrayim, liskor she'en yeush klal." The whole purpose of remembering Yitziat Mitzrayim, the exodus of Egypt, is to remember that there's no despair in the world. Yeush is the ultimate expression of giving up, letting yourself go into a state of despair. V'lachen, nitztavinu liskor b'chol yom Yitziat Mitzrayim, ve'en ha'mekuvan shel haschira b'peh bilbad, ela sheyeh davar ze nikba balev, ba'omek lev kol Yisrael. We have been commanded to remember each day Yitziat Mitzrayim. And this memory should not just be said as mere words. Rather, it should be carved deep in the heart of every Israelite. And why are we commanded to remember this every day? As a people, throughout our history, starting from Yitziat Mitzrayim, we have been in some of the deepest, darkest places, and we can each fill in the blank, both on a personal level and as a people. We had nothing. We were broken. But even from those places, there was liberation. This is what the Seder means to me. That no matter how low we feel, how frightened we are, how broken our world is right now, there has to be hope. The mere possibility that things could go wrong has to mean that the possibility exists that things could go right. We've been to places of despair, but we have always been liberated. We must carve this idea in our hearts. The last line of the Seder is in the song Chad Gadya. The words are Ve'ata HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'hu shachat lemalach hamavet. And God came and slaughtered the angel of death. This Pesach, may God come and stop the angel of death. And may our current liberation come quickly and soon. Chag Kasher v'Sameach.
Amen. Beautiful. Thank you. We're gonna end our program with one more poem and then one more song. So I'm gonna turn to Judy Katz for the poem and then to Rabbi Angela Buchdahl for the song. Judy, thank you.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Ariella, I promised to be 5 minutes, but I'm going to skip the interpreting and read you 2 poems. So I'm going to talk at the beginning. I remember after I was doing my MFA at Sarah Lawrence when the events of 9/11 occurred, and one of my teachers said, do you notice how people who don't even read poetry or like poetry are turning to poetry now? And he was saying, I think it's the voice that people need to hear of one person, one fellow human whispering directly into your ear. And it is true that poetry has a way of speaking privately to a lot of people at one time. And especially in times of isolation, you know, we want to know, how is it for you, this experience of living? And I think that all writing of poetry and reading of poetry is in itself an act of hope. So I'm going to read 2 poems. The first one is a poem that I wrote a while ago. This is not the hope part, just saying. This is kind of the questions part of things. It's a poem that I wrote about some questions in midlife, but it kind of revolved around a Passover theme and is built on questions. And it bizarrely is feeling like it was written for just this moment. So I'm going to read you that one first. It's called Questions for My Tribe in Midlife. And then I'm going to read a beautiful poem, I think, about spring by a contemporary poet named Ada Limon. And it will be very clear why I'm reading that one too. Okay, so let me try and find these. Yeah, come to me. Okay. Questions for my tribe in midlife. Was it a cloud or a pillar of fire that led you lost people through the desert? And were you lost or merely uncertain, as I feel nearly every day now? And when you say wandered, do you mean your time was unstructured and so felt endless? Your looking brought no pleasure? And when you looked, could you see through the cloud, or was it like driving through fog on the Cape? And the moisture beating up on your forearm, was that God? And the fire with its bright noise, did it frighten or delight? And how long would this go on anyway, this not being here nor there? I forgot to say one thing about that. The midlife part of the midlife part was that I was not remembering things, and I was trying to remember texts I had learned a long time ago. And rather than look them up, I decided to use my senior memory thing to make a poem and say, was it a cloud or a pillar of fire? And so it got going from there. Okay, on to the hope. So that's our state of being. This is, you guys are all in New York City. I am a little further north, and the crabapple trees and cherry trees have not started to blossom here, but I think this will speak to you there. Instructions on not giving up. More than the fuchsia funnels breaking out of the crabapple tree, more than the neighbor's almost obscene display of cherry limbs shoving their cotton candy colored blossoms to the slate sky of spring rains. It's the greening of the trees that really gets to me. When all the shock of white and taffy, the world's baubles and trinkets leave the pavement strewn with the confetti of aftermath. The leaves come, patient, plodding, a green skin growing over whatever winter did to us, a return to the strange idea of continuous living, despite the mess of us, the hurt, the empty. Fine then, I'll take it, the trees seem to say, a new slick leaf unfurling like a fist to an open palm. I'll take it all. Okay.
Thank you, Judy.
Contribution.
Rabbi Angela, leave us with a song of hope, please. Thank you.
I am so inspired by all these incredibly beautiful teachings. I'm going to close with a song. It's actually two songs that are a mashup of an ancient prayer and a modern day kind of pop song. And I love the fact that you can have these two melodies that were written millennia apart and that they speak to each other in this song. And that one part of the song, the prayer, asks for God's protection and shelter and peace, and the other one reminds us of our own agency to make that day come, a day of hopefulness. And I think that I also really love the idea that as we come into this holiday is also an opportunity for us to have, in our modern day, to take the song of our life and to speak to generations past that are all speaking to each other across the millennia. And I think part of what feels hopeful is the reminder that we've been here before and we've been in these narrow places and we've come out on the other side. And so I think that this mixing of our story, our current story with our ancient story is sort of what this song reminds me of. And I hope that if you know it, that you'll sing along with me. And even if you don't know it, I'll teach you one part and I'll get you to sing it with me wherever you are. Sometimes I lay under the moon and thank God I'm breathing. Then I say, don't take me soon, 'cause I'm here for a reason. Sometimes in my tears I drown, and I never let it get me down. 'Cause when negativity surrounds, I know someday it'll all come around. Because all my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that they don't want to fight no more. There'll be no more war, and our children will play one day, one day, one day. Oh, one day, one day, one day. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Leshalom V'hamidenu Makeh L'chaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Leshalom V'hamidenu Makeh L'chaim. So here's the song. The thing about this mashup, I need two voices, or at least two voices. So I do happen to have my daughter over there, and I couldn't convince her to do this with me before, but now I'm putting pressure on her in front of all of you. So come on over here, Rosie. You're just gonna sing the one day part. Okay, Mira's looking right at you. She's expecting you to come. She's gonna kill me for this later, but here we go. So Rosie's gonna sing the one day part. Here we go. Nice and loud. Here we go. One day, one day, one day. So you follow Rose, do that again. One day, one day, one day. You keep going with that. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Lishalom V'hamidenu Malkeinu L'chaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Lishalom V'hamidenu Malkeinu L'chaim. One day, one day, one day. Oh.
Thank you, Rabbi Angela. Thank you, Rose. Thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you to all of you for being here with us. I wish you a Chag Kasher v'Sameach. May you have a Pesach filled with health and safety and love and joy, even if it was not the Pesach you were planning for. Thank you all for being the community that can usher us into this holiday in this way together. Have a wonderful night. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.